This is a 50 to 55-minute general presentation for all audiences. Gamalux Lighting Systems is a family-owned company in the linear lighting systems business in Southern California. Our original factory location was in Monrovia, California, and the company was founded in 1987 by a father and son team of design engineers who were interested in developing products that could be quickly modified in order to meet very specific needs for any given project. The company is currently located in San Dimas, California, about 25 or so miles east of Los Angeles and roughly 25 miles west of San Bernardino. Our core values at Gamalux are really what define us and drive us to operate the way that we do. And the same is the truth for every person, every family, every organization. There is a set of core values that those people and groups of people adhere to, and it's those core values that kind of act as the glasses to filter information from the world, and then also as the megaphone to project your ideas and thoughts out into the world. And so at Gamalux, it's important for us not only to obviously remind ourselves of our own core values, but be understanding of the core values of the people that we're dealing with. And so as we go through this presentation, you're going to see a lot of references to core values. Of course, our first core value is collaboration. We want to understand what's going on in the mind of either a specifier or a distributor or a contractor, what's important to them, so that we can be responsive to those needs. We can act accordingly. Also, quality. Certainly, every manufacturer can get job number one by sharing pretty photos in Photoshop and renderings, or telling people what they want to hear. But it's really the product quality that's going to maintain those continual orders coming in. And so, of course, quality has to be one of our very important core values. And of course, and then lastly, integrity. The truth is sometimes things go wrong, and it's on every manufacturer to go about things in a conscientious manner, to be responsive when it looks like maybe even things were their fault. And so at Gamalux, we dive in. We want to understand what went wrong so that we can come up with a practical solution, because that's how we build confidence in others, by being responsive to their needs. So our core values of collaboration, quality, and integrity are one of those core values is going to be on each one of these pages, which I think is a good reminder of why we operate the way that we do. Our most popular product line is the G-Beam or the Gamalux Beam series of fixtures, and this is that group of square and rectangular forms that's been so popular over the last 15 years or so. Now, the truth is there are multiple manufacturers that make very, very similar stuff, and so it's difficult for a manufacturer to differentiate themselves simply based on product, because the reality is as soon as they reveal a new product at Light Fair, within just a few months, there are other manufacturers making the very same thing. So for Gamalux, what we figured out is how to create value within a project and help the other people that are involved in that project to do their very best work and possibly build their reputations along the way. So as an example, we'll take a look at this particular situation where we've got fixtures coming up the wall and across the ceiling. This is a very common type of installation these days, recessed fixtures in the walls and in the ceilings in a pattern. But what's uncommon is the fact that the wall and the ceiling don't touch each other. This is very unusual. Now, this was not our idea. This was the architect's idea to convey the concept of the ceilings floating up and down on rails of light at Schindler Elevator Corporation headquarters, where they make elevators. And so now, because the walls and ceilings don't touch each other, that means there's going to be a gap between the two. It's about a 3-inch gap that was left. Now, this causes a particular problem for a recessed fixture because, see, these recessed fixtures, if you take a look at a sample of a recessed fixture, you're going to find it's not very attractive on the sides and the back and the top. The reason for that is because it's got brackets and flanges and grooves and holes and all these components on the top or the sides of the fixture so it can interface with the ceiling. Well, nobody wants to walk down this corridor and look inside that 3-inch gap and see all those components on the side of the fixture. So rather than using a recessed fixture, what we did is we took a suspended fixture with smooth sides on it, and we modified that fixture just in the area where it needs to interface with the wall or interface with the ceiling. But we did not modify the fixture in the area where it was going to be exposed inside that 3-inch gap. And what this does for us, it now allows us to take what used to be a suspended fixture and recess it. Now, when we do that, now it's the smooth side of the unmodified portion of the housing that's actually visible inside that 3-inch gap. Now, as you're considering projects like this, you also have to be realistic about price, and of course, VE conversations definitely come into play. So, when you're considering a VE, you also need to be conscientious of how that other manufacturer operates. See, most manufacturers are going to provide 2 fixtures, one in the wall and one in the ceiling, and then it's up to the installing contractor to get them to join together. Well, the problem with having 2 separate fixtures is that the fixture in the ceiling is going to have its own end cap. And then when it's butted up against the fixture that's in the wall, you'll see that visible end cap. Or if maybe the fixture that's in the ceiling extends into the wall, well, the fixture that's in the wall is going to have to butt up against the bottom of that ceiling-mounted fixture, and again, you'll have a visible end cap. Now, this is certainly something you have to avoid, where the installing contractor doesn't know that these are going to be 2 separate fixtures, and then the fixtures arrive at the job site, and the contractor has to try to figure out how these are going to be installed in the space, and sometimes the solutions are not so pretty. So we want to avoid that. Now, maybe a better manufacturer, rather than providing 2 fixtures that kind of get butted up against each other, that better manufacturer might create a miter joint that the installing contractor has to put together back behind the wall and above the ceiling. And of course, in theory, this works out, but in reality, it could be quite difficult. So at Gamalux, what we do is we actually provide an L-shaped fixture that comes up the wall and across the ceiling a few inches, so that the installing contractor is simply working with a very simple butt joint between those 2 elements, the recessed ceiling-mounted fixture and the one that's coming up the wall and across the ceiling. Now, we miter cut and weld that corner at the factory as a perfect 90 degrees, so we ensure that everything is going to fit and work properly in the space without any guesswork and without any, how shall I say, beat to fit in the field on the part of the installing contractor. Now, if we're dealing with very complex patterns of fixtures, whether they're suspended or surface-mounted or recessed, there's a lot of potential problems that come up on jobs like this. Now, you might be able to see in the reflection in the glass here, this is actually one pattern of fixtures weaving its way through the entire space, through the entire floor in that building. Now, this could potentially cause a lot of problems, because every distributor and contractor who are bidding on these jobs, they all have different interpretations of all the parts and pieces that are necessary in order to be ordered, so that they can complete that pattern. And so what ends up happening is they send inconsistent quote requests to the sales office. Now, the sales office, they can only answer the questions that have been given to them, so they're providing different answers to all the distributors that are requesting quotes on this thing, and it creates this inconsistency in all of the quote requests. So what we want to do is we want to avoid those problems by actually working with the original design intent from the designer. What we want to do is find out the original design that was dreamed up, and we want to provide what we call a development drawing. This development drawing takes all the details that as we know them at this time, all the dimensions, the angles and such, and we're going to create for you what we call a development drawing with all of the engineered details as part of that drawing. Now, along with that entire pattern of fixtures drawn from an engineering standpoint, we also provide a complete part number for the entire pattern of fixtures. One part number which includes all of the components. And you see that this makes sense. For instance, if you want to go buy a car, you don't ask the dealer for 4 tires and a brake system and a windshield and some wiper blades and some chairs and a radio, and then you put it all together at your house, right? You buy a car. It's an engineered system, and you expect that all the components that are necessary for that system to work are included when you buy the car with one price. So, along with the one part number for this entire pattern, we also provide one quotable price. And once the sales office adds the distributor and contractor markups, that new purchase price and installed price can be given to the specifier to then be passed on to the owner to create a real understanding of what this pattern should actually cost, rather than dreams and hopes and maybe it's within the budget. So we want to handle those things with knowledge from the very beginning, and the development drawing helps us to do that. Now, because this is all one part number, obviously we have to identify all the individual components in that pattern of fixtures, so we apply what we call mod numbers, or module location identifiers, to each of the components in this pattern of fixtures. Now, this mod number follows each of those components through the entire production process. So again, we at the factory, as well as the customer, know exactly where everything is supposed to go in that pattern of fixtures. Now, everything that we build at Gamalux is actually fully assembled twice before we pack it and ship it. First, before it's painted, to make sure all the dimensions are correct, make sure all the joining mechanisms line in and lock together the way they're supposed to, all the angles are correct. Then we take the whole thing apart, paint it, put in the electrical, and reassemble the entire thing, checking every circuit, every battery pack. We're going to dim the whole thing up and down. We check the occupancy sensors, the daylight harvesting sensors. We even check the finish of one housing to the next in continuous runs to make sure that everything looks and performs the way that it's supposed to before we pack and ship. Now, those fixtures are each marked with their individual location identifier, so the installing contractor knows exactly where everything goes at the job site. We include that location identifier on the fixture itself, also in the UL label, the identification label that's inside the fixture. We put that location identifier on the bubble wrap of the fixture, and then on both ends of the carton. So if you're looking at this side of the pallet or that side of the pallet, you will actually know exactly what's on that pallet. Now, before we ship it out, we take a digital photo of that pallet to ensure that we know exactly what was on the pallet, and we can also provide that to the customer. And maybe if in case one of the modules gets lost, we can show exactly where it was on the pallet, and hopefully they're able to find it at the job site rather than having to reorder that one element, and then we have to wait for a lead time for that item to be built. Now, when we send the pallet of fixtures, we also provide a new layout drawing with all of the mod numbers or the location numbers overlaid onto that layout drawing, so that, again, the installing contractor knows where everything goes. To as much as possible, we try to include all of the fixtures that are going to be required in that pattern or in a continuous run. Include all of those fixtures on the same pallet. We don't want to send all the 4-footers on one pallet, all the 8-footers on another pallet, and then the hanging parts are shipping out next Tuesday, like some of our competitors do. We want to make sure that everything is on the same pallet as a complete package so the installing contractor can work quickly and efficiently at that job site. As a matter of fact, every job that ships out ships on a custom-made pallet that is 2 inches longer and wider on all 4 sides than any carton on the pallet. Because we know exactly what happens. You know, if we make a 10-foot fixture and put it on an 8-foot pallet, you know what's going to happen in shipping, right? You're going to have damaged ends on your fixtures. So even if we make a 4-foot fixture, we don't put it on a standard 4-foot pallet. We'll put it on a custom-made 4-foot 4-inch pallet so that there are 2 inches of air gap all the way around the carton. So as the shipment is rumbling across the country, it's the pallets that are banging together and not the fixtures themselves. Now, we can integrate other manufacturers' components into our fixtures. Say, for instance, you're doing a job where you want linear lighting systems and then you also want some track heads. Well, we can actually work with that track manufacturer to get those track heads built in as part of our linear lighting system. What this does for you, it cleans up the ceiling system, which is very nice, right? You don't have all that mumbo-jumbo all over the ceiling, so it cleans things up, very nice for the architect or the interior designer. It still maintains all of the features that those various lighting elements have, so the lighting designer likes that. You still have all the same lighting characteristics in the space. Now, because this is all built in as one housing, it's one part number for the distributor to order, which is nice, and also one shipment for them to have to track, which is also very nice. And then for the installing contractor, it's one housing to put up in the space instead of multiple. So what we're doing here is we're creating value within the project using all the components that would have normally had to be used anyway, but building them in such a way that it actually helps everybody else to work more quickly and efficiently throughout the job, creating value within the project. Now, if you want to have fixtures embedded into the walls or into the ceilings, usually you don't want to see that flange that goes all the way around the fixtures, right? That kind of frame that's visible. So you specify what you call a flangeless fixture. Well, those flangeless fixtures do have a flange on it, but it's a mud flange. It gets mudded over and painted out here, so you don't see it. Well, we have the same thing as well. However, we have an element as part of our mud flange fixture that nobody else has, and it is an expansion gap. See, the reason for this is because when the lamps come on, whether they're fluorescent or LED, they're going to create a little bit of heat, and that heats up the housing. And you know that any material that heats up expands. So if we had put our mud flange directly up against the side of our housing, then when the housing heats up, the mud flange will actually put pressure on the surrounding plaster. It'll expand and put pressure, and then, of course, eventually you get those cracks. It doesn't happen on grand opening day of the new facility downtown, but eventually, over time, those cracks will start to develop. So by building our fixtures at the factory, not in the field, but at the factory with this expansion gap as part of the construction of our fixture, it eliminates the pressure on the surrounding plaster when the housings expand from heat. Now, let's talk about a little bit modification to that mud flange. Here's an application in an architect's private residence in his guest restroom where he has this half-inch reveal or half-inch gap all the way around the mirror. So the mirror's kind of floating in space. Now let's take a closer look, and you can see that gap here. Now, normally we would put our mud flange around all four sides of our fixture. But if we put the mud flange on the bottom of the fixture, then you would actually see it in the gap between the mirror and the fixture. And obviously that's not desirable. So now it would be the responsibility of the installing contractor to rip that mud flange off the bottom of the fixture and fill in the holes that he just drilled in, and then cover everything with a coat of touch-up paint, and all this additional work just because improper collaboration was going on. So if we can understand what's going on in the space, you let us know, oh, there's going to be a half-inch gap between the bottom of the mirror and the bottom of the fixture and the top of the mirror, then we'll just put our mud flange on the sides and the top of the fixture, but not the bottom. So we will modify our fixtures as necessary for any particular job, and most of the time there's no additional cost associated with this. Now, if we're building fixtures into the architecture coming around all four sides of the built environment, obviously you understand we have to have exact field dimensions for this kind of thing. Now, we will quote to CAD dimensions, but we do not build to CAD dimensions because we know these walls will not be built to CAD dimensions. So we do require a signature approval from the installing contractor, not the architect, not the designer, not the salesperson, not the engineer, but the installing contractor on those corner-to-corner dimensions. Once we get that signature approval of those dimensions, that's when we can start building the fixtures. Now, the gyp does not have to be in first. As long as the studs are up, they'll know the thickness of the gyp that they're going to use, and then they can calculate what the corner-to-corner dimension will be. Now, here's an application where we're taking our fixture, we're assembling everything at the factory. You notice that we have smooth sides on this fixture. It's upside down right now. We're putting all the LEDs in. You notice the smooth sides, which means this used to be a suspended fixture, and we're modifying it. It's going to come into play in here just a minute. Now, we're adding a flange, a cover flange, to the bottom of this fixture, but notice that the cover flange actually stops right here. And then out here, we have no flange. And then you see the shadow again. The cover flange starts up again, and then there's no flange, and then we have flange, no flange, flange, no flange. So what's going on here is the flanged portion of the fixture is actually going to be embedded into the ceiling, and the non-flanged portion of the fixture is actually going to be suspended outside of that ceiling. And I'll show you an application photo in just a moment. Now, as I mentioned, everything we build at the factory is fully assembled twice because you need to know that we're handling things like light leak here at the factory, because a factory solution is always better than a field solution. This is one of the reasons why we operate the way that we do. See, Gamalux was founded by engineers, and engineers are all about attention to detail and making sure the job is done correctly. And so this ideology of an engineering mindset has permeated its way through the entire organization. This is why we're very much into the fine details as we construct these fixtures. Now, here's the application in reality. I'm standing on a lobby floor, and I'm taking a photo facing up. Oops. Now, I've got a second floor walkway directly above me, and then above that second floor walkway, there's another ceiling, and then there's a raised ceiling above that. So you can see that the fixtures are actually embedded into that lower ceiling and then cantilevered out and then suspended from that upper ceiling. It's a little bit difficult. It's a cheap camera, so let's go upstairs and see if we can get a better view. All right, so here we are. We're up on that second floor walkway, and you can very clearly see the fixtures are recessed and suspended, recessed and suspended. All right, now here's where things went wrong. See, this job was originally specified with our mud flange, where the fixtures have to be installed into the studs framing first, and then the jip is built around our mud flange, and then it's mudded over and then painted over, and you wouldn't see it. It's very beautiful. But the problem was the installing contractor ran out of time for whatever reason. Maybe they sat on the order too long or didn't understand what was specified. Who knows? There's all kind of reasons why orders get delayed. But in this particular case, they didn't have time for us to provide the fixtures and then build the jip around the fixtures. So what they said was, hey, Gamalux, we want you to switch your order from the mud flange over to a cover flange, which you see here. And while you're back at the factory building those fixtures, we'll go ahead and we'll put up the jip, and we'll cut slots in the jip in the same dimension as what you're building at the factory. And in theory, that's going to work out great. But truth is, sometimes reality isn't as good as theory, and that's exactly what happened here. Let's draw a straight line and show you what happened. In this particular case, you can see that there's a little bit of an inconsistency right here. You see this angle? The problem here was that they cut the slots in the jip at a different dimension than the fixtures were built, and they didn't have time to go back and correct it. And this meant that they had to hyperextend the corner of that fixture, and now when you hyperextend the corner, the lenses don't fit inside the corner, and the visible flange, which they thought was going to be a solution to that problem, now there's gaps in the flanges. Now, eventually, those problems got solved, and we were able to help with that, but the truth is this kind of thing shouldn't be happening in the first place. With proper collaboration and letting us know when the product has to be on site, we can set a reverse timetable of when we need those signature approvals so that we have time to build product, and the installing contractor has time to put them up so that the drywall guy can put up the drywall and mud around the fixtures. With proper collaboration, everybody wins. Of course, otherwise, everybody loses. So we want to avoid that if possible. Now, here's an application where we took a standard suspended fixture, a 4-inch wide, 4-inch tall suspended fixture on cables, and we built it into patterns at the factory. Now, again, we don't want the installing contractor putting together all of these miter joints because that would be very difficult to do in the field. So what we did is we made L-shaped fixtures with a butt joint right here, or a V-shaped fixture with a butt joint right here, or a T-shaped fixture with a butt joint here or here or here. We want the installing contractor to work with butt joints wherever possible, and there's just a simple nut and bolt that holds everything nice and tight. We don't want them putting together miter joints. Now, obviously this is a very unique installation, but this is not a custom fixture. And AVA Medical Facility in Seattle did not need to pay custom dollars to have a fixture embedded or installed on the concrete wall in their parking garage to point people in the direction of where they need to park. Now, because this is a parking garage, we don't know about the safety and security of that place. There could be vagrants, vandals or whatnot. So we can actually include polycarbonate lenses in the construction of our fixture. Very vandal resistant. And we can hold those lenses in because normally our lenses just snap into place. We don't want people snapping them out. So we can hold those lenses in with tamper resistant fasteners as well. Now, in this particular case, because the fixtures were surface mounted on that wall, we were able to drive the fasteners in through the top and the bottom of the housing to hold those lenses in, rather than shooting the fasteners through the face of the lens where they would create a shadow and kind of an undesirable effect. Now, all of our fixtures can be built as individuals or in patterns or in continuous runs. Now, certainly in those continuous runs, we will fully illuminate those runs of fixtures without any gaps and shadows at the ends or in the middle of the run. To my knowledge, we're the only manufacturer that can make a housing up to 24 feet long all in a single piece and support the whole thing with just 2 cables. The reason why we're able to do that is because we're using very rigid material, extruded aluminum. And once it comes out of the die in that shape, it wants to maintain that shape. It doesn't want to bend into some other shape. And so we use this to our advantage. Now, if it's tall rectangular housing like this one, it has a lot of rigidity to it. So we're actually able to support that entire housing with just 2 cables. Now, if you specify or order a 24-foot run, we're not automatically going to make it single piece. It's going to come out as 2 12-footers or 3 8-footers. But if you specify this as a 24-foot single-piece housing, that's how we're going to make it. And if it has enough rigidity, we will provide only 2 cables to support the thing. If it's a flat rectangle, it doesn't have a whole lot of strength, so we'll need the 3rd cable in the middle. But generally speaking, we want to talk about those things on an individual basis so we can figure out the best way to build them. Obviously, this is something that we avoid. With long housings, we We eliminate unnecessary joints. See, when Southwest Airlines has to move in tomorrow, the installing contractor is running out of time, and they don't have time sometimes to tighten up every single joint and get rid of all the light leak. They've got sagging joints in various places, and this creates an aesthetic problem. So if we have very long housings, we eliminate that problem because there are no joints to create light leak or possibly pinched wires as the housings are being joined together. Of course, how do you ship a 24-foot housing? On a custom-made 25-foot pallet with a steel gondola holding the whole thing together. So when the forks come in, we don't have 12 feet of fixtures dangling off the ends, bending and deforming. We're very thorough in our methods to ensure that what we build can actually be installed in good condition. Now, the way we build our fixtures actually helps us to avoid many problems that are common with other manufacturers. Here's the end of a fixture that's going to be joined to another fixture in a continuous run. This is our joiner plate, and there will be a joiner plate in the next fixture with 4 holes in these positions, and just a nut and a bolt in each of those 4 holes in both plates ties them together and holds everything nice and tight. All right, now to join this joiner plate onto the end of our housing, of course, we have to screw it on. Now, you know how screws go in, right? Righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, right? And so what you might not know is at the very last moment of tightening that screw into place, it actually imparts a very subtle twisting force into the housing. Now, it doesn't deform the housing or bend it or anything silly like that, but it gives it a little bit of a torque, a lean, a desire to twist. Well, the problem with that is when you've got multiple joints in a continuous run and you've got 2 of these plates per joint, you're actually increasing the possibility of a twist in that continuous run. And I see this kind of thing all the time, especially in airports with long runs of fixtures, maybe over the ticketing counters and such, where I look down that run of fixtures and I see this very subtle twist in the runs of fixtures, and obviously you've got to avoid that kind of thing. So what we do at Gamalux, because we're owned and run by engineers, we understand about these physical forces, so we will actually use right turn and left turn screws to hold those plates into our fixture. And by doing this, we negate that twist. We equalize that torque at every joint so that none of those joints are creating a twist in the long run of fixtures. Now, we paint over those screws. The installing contractor doesn't know anything about these screws. You can imagine them trying to install this screw right here, trying to screw it in. It never goes in, and they complain about it, right? So we don't ask contractors to put this stuff together. We paint over those screws. The contractor is just using nuts and bolts right here with these 4 holes. But we want you to understand, this is the manufacturer that we are. We are very much into the fine details to ensure that you don't have problems on the job site after the product ships. Now, let's talk about a little bit of theory and then reality. Here's a theory. Here's an idea from a designer where they wanted a 12-foot housing with 8 feet of that housing embedded into the lower ceiling. There's a floor below, of course. The 8 feet of that 12-foot housing embedded into the ceiling, and the last 4 feet of that housing, they wanted it to cantilever out of the wall to provide bidirectional illumination or indirect illumination in the top to illuminate the upper ceiling above, and they wanted no cable support from above. Now, you can imagine, this is the kind of thing that most manufacturers don't want anything to do with because they're not in this kind of business. See, as small manufacturers get bought up by the big guys, very soon all of their special characteristics go away. Well, Gamalux is not for sale, and we run with an engineering mentality. We're interested in this kind of stuff. We want to figure out how to get it done. So here's how we do it. We're going to take a 12-foot-long suspended fixture like every other manufacturer has. You can name them alphabetically. You know exactly who's in New Jersey, who's in California, what manufacturer's in Colorado. You know all of these things. Every manufacturer has basically the same materials. But how you use your materials and use your resources differently than the other guys, well, that's how you create value. So what we're going to do is take the same type of product that all the other manufacturers have, we're going to modify it the way that Gamalux does. We'll add our mud flange onto the bottom of 8 feet of that fixture. You see that here. We're going to add a mounting plate in the top of that housing, and we're going to coordinate that mounting plate with the installing contractor before we start building fixtures, so that when the contractor opens up the boxes, he's not looking at a surprise. He's actually looking at something that he helped to develop, and now he has a sense of ownership. in this job, a sense of partnership. And that's what we want. We want partners, people who are working with us to attain the same goal. Now, in the last 4 feet of that fixture, of course, we left it unchanged. This was a fluorescent job we did about 10 years ago or so, but it doesn't matter. It could have been LED as well. The concepts apply either way. So what we're doing here is we're taking what used to be a 12-foot long suspended fixture, and now we're having it embedded into the ceiling with mud flanges and a mounting component that the installing contractor developed, because it's going to help him to work more quickly and efficiently. And the last 4 feet of that single piece housing is cantilevered out to provide bidirectional illumination to illuminate the ceiling above, and no cable support. This went to the job site at $200 per linear foot, and we never got one phone call from the installing contractor. This is not a custom fixture. This is a standard fixture that's been modified specifically for that job. Now, here's a residential application, very similar concept. The architect, remember the architect with the bathroom mirror? Well, this is his kitchen. He's got these 8-foot countertops, and he wanted the fixtures centered directly above those 8-foot countertops. And that means that we have 3 feet in the ceiling and 5 feet sticking out. And, of course, because of the strain on the ceiling, we need the support cable to support from above. But if it's only a couple feet sticking out of the ceiling, we don't need the support cable. So it just depends on what's going on in the space will determine whether or not we need that support cable. Now, we can use patterns of fixtures to differentiate different ceiling systems. Here's a wall, of course, and then there's a ceiling directly above the camera here. In the ceiling, we have a gyp portion, and then we have a grid portion. But we're using the fixture actually to create a frame around that grid portion in order to delineate those two ceiling systems. We have our mud flange around the outside of that pattern of fixtures to interface with the gyp ceiling, and then our grid flange to interface with the grid ceiling 2 inches above the bottom of the fixture, because that's what the designer wanted. But if you want everything to be flush, we can do that. Or if you want the grid ceiling flush with the bottom of the ceiling, bottom of the fixture, and you want the gyp ceiling raised up 2 inches or 3 inches or 5 inches, whatever it happens to be, we can put our flanges wherever you wish on the sides of our fixture to create character in the ceiling line. Wayfinding applications. Follow the fixtures to the boardroom, the conference room, and any angles, by the way, not just 45s and 90s. You saw that AVA sample where I think we were doing 27 or 30-degree angles on that one. Very simple for us to do. We can interface with any ceiling system, wood, metal, gyp, grid, any kind of grid, doesn't matter. Even if it's some kind of system we've never heard of before, if it's a stretched fabric system or it's made of pixie dust, it doesn't matter what the ceiling system is. As long as we can find out what it is, we will figure out how to interface properly with that ceiling system. Here's an application where we're going and creating steps in the ceiling, coming up to the center and then back down on the other side of the room. Now, if you think about a step ceiling, there's a lot of complexity in that kind of thing. And, of course, all the players involved, everybody thinks they're going to make a lot of money because it's so custom, and the owner should have to pay a lot for it. But that doesn't have to be the case. See, what we did is we found out what the ceiling system was. In this case, it's the Armstrong Axiom ceiling system, which uses a C-shaped extruded channel that gets installed onto the walls at the ceiling line. And then the grid slides along that channel wherever it's supposed to go, and then they drop in the tiles. So what we did is we got a hold of that C-shaped channel called the vector trim, and we attached it on the sides of our fixture. That's the blue C-shaped piece here. We attached it on the sides of our fixture at 2 different heights here at the factory in San Dimas. Then we cut everything to the proper length, of course, and we painted it all with the same paint so it looks like one properly engineered system. Then the fixtures arrive on site and they're installed wall to wall at the height and spacing that they were supposed to be. Then the ceiling contractor gets there and just snaps the grid right into the sides of the fixture. Everything is independently supported. Grid is supported by itself. Fixtures are supported by themselves. So we don't have one resting on the other, but they're all properly interfacing with each other. So you get the benefit of a custom step ceiling without any of the custom dollars associated. So we create value within the project. Now, here's an application where we're going from fully recessed to semi-recessed with flanges down low to carry the cut tiles here, and then flanges up high to carry the cut tiles here. And you can see one of the reflections of one of the flanges here. Now you notice there aren't any grooves and brackets and holes and things because this is not a recessed fixture. This is a suspended fixture that we modified so that it could be recessed. Now this trim detail, the designer wanted that trim detail to butt right up against the side of our fixture, but because it cuts across our fixture at an angle, it means that we had to cut the flanges on both sides of our fixture, high and low, at different locations with a 3-degree cut. in that flange. And because this trim is cutting across our fixture at a 3-degree angle, it's hitting each fixture at a slightly different location all the way down this side of the room, all the way down the left side of the room on 6 floors. No 2 fixtures were identical, and this is all one type on the fixture schedule. We cut those trims down to 256 of an inch at the factory. Everything fit together like puzzle pieces at the job site. Now, this required a lot of collaboration leading up to the time that we built the fixtures, but after we built them and they were shipped out, we never got one phone call from that installing contractor. We're very much into the fine details to have the collaborative calls that we need to. If it's webinars or sending samples back and forth with the installer, we'll be glad to do that, because this is how reputations are built. This is how businesses are made, and we want to be in the dead center of all of that. And that's how we create value within projects, by helping others to do their very best work. Now here is a different kind of sealing system. It's the Hunter Douglas textile sealing, where the panels snap onto the grid from below. So there's a grid above, but you can't see it because the panels are actually underlapping the grid, and now there's just a little 1/4 inch gap between those panels. So what we did, because the panels are 1 1/8 inches thick, they drop 1 1/8 inches below the bottom of the grid, we dropped our fixture 1 1/8 inches below the bottom of the grid, so that you have consistency in the sealing line. And we flared out the bottom of our fixture so that it underlaps the grid the same dimension that the panels do. And this allows us to maintain that nice 1/4 inch gap between the side of our fixture and the panels, just like the panels have. So again, building fixtures specific to that kind of sealing system, or of course the Armstrong Tech Zone sealing, the 4-inch zone, the 6-inch zone. Obviously, everybody's very familiar with that. But what you might not be familiar with is that Gamalux can actually create continuous runs even in the 4-inch zone, because our housing is made of extruded aluminum. It's very rigid, and we have these brackets along the side of our housing that grab onto that grid and help the grid to stay perfectly straight. So it eliminates the need for that U-shaped yoke that Armstrong has to provide in order to keep their grid straight. We don't need the yoke, because when the fixture is there, the fixture is actually keeping the grid perfectly straight. This is the Hunter Douglas box series sealing system, where they have nominal 4-inch and 6-inch panels. We've made our fixture the same width as the panels, so you don't have any inconsistency in the look and the feel of the sealing system. And then in line at the end of our fixture, we've got a joiner spline to join in line with the cut panel at the end of our fixtures. So you go panel, panel, fixture, panel, 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 fixture, on and on and on. You have got consistency in the sealing system. Now the brackets that we use on the top of our fixture interface perfectly with the universal carrier that holds these panels up. We've worked out very closely with Hunter Douglas all of those fine details, so we can ensure that everything fits together the way that it's supposed to, allowing these brackets to slide along the side of our fixture so that they can interface with the universal carrier wherever it needs to. So the sealing system is not dependent upon our fixture at all, and the fixture is not dependent upon the sealing system at all. Everything works independently of each other, but coordinates properly with each other. Obviously, this is the kind of thing you need to avoid, these one-size-fits-all solutions that are not really solutions at all. We always want to find out exactly what the sealing system is so we can avoid this kind of aesthetic problem. Now, if you're making lighting calculations, obviously accuracy is very important. So in our lighting calculation page, we're showing down to tenths of a lumen per foot in all the different output and color temperature and lensing options that we offer. To my knowledge, we're the only manufacturer that provides an image of what the lens looks like in our fixture with the LEDs fully illuminated behind it. This is unique. See, most manufacturers only show that glamour shot of the picture of the fixture in its very best condition. We've got that too, of course, but we also show you an image of what the lens in that fixture is going to look like with the LEDs fully illuminated behind it, because we don't want you to just choose the fixture based on its performance characteristics, but also understand about the aesthetics. Now, right next to that image in our specification sheet, there's the hot link to download your IS file. There's the hot link to download your Revit file. So you don't have to go to the zip file on our website and play catalog number bingo trying to figure out which one is the right file. We make it easily available to you right there in our specification sheet. Now, if you want to use fixtures of multiple widths in a particular job, well, those different width fixtures are going to have different outputs and different apparent brightness. So what we offer is custom programming of our drivers to get all the apparent brightness to be exactly the same. Or maybe you want all the fixtures to consume no more than 5.75 watts per linear foot. We can do that. We can custom program our drivers for output or input, whatever you need, and we don't charge anything extra for that. It's just additional value that we can provide. In the top and the bottom of our fixture, rather than having that just standard flat lens, we now offer three-dimensional lenses in the tops and the bottom in our fixtures of 1.5", 2-inch, 3-inch, or 4-inch width. And that's in suspended fixtures as well as recessed. Individuals or continuous runs, or even patterns. In addition to three-dimensional lenses that drop down from the bottom of the fixture, we can actually regress the lens up into the housing of the fixture at whatever dimension you require. By modifying the exterior of our housing, we can actually create a regressed lens effect inside the fixture, and by doing that, it gives you a great deal of flexibility in aesthetic design. All of our fixtures can be built for damp location suitability. We do not make wet location fixtures or natatorium fixtures where they're in like an indoor pool area because the chemicals in the air will just eat right through that housing. But if all you need is a damp location where there's going to be moisture in the air, fog, things of that nature, well, obviously we don't want all that condensation to cause problems inside the fixtures, so we treat them a little bit differently here at the factory and make them suitable for damp location environments. Wall washing is a very important part of good lighting design. And obviously, if you're washing a wall, usually you want to wash that wall as evenly as possible. If our wall wash fixture is set 36 inches back from the object wall, in this particular application using 80-50-20 reflectivity assumptions, we can get a max of 49-foot candles on the wall and a min of 42. That is a 1 to 1.17 uniformity ratio. Absolutely unheard of and unbelievable uniformity on the wall. Obviously, other competitors have wall wash fixtures, but we don't think too highly of them. Products like this that are bound by the grid, you can't go continuous runs. You can't make them any special lengths so that you fill up that space with the fixture. And look, they're leaving shadows at the top of the wall because they're just insufficient products for a true wall washing requirement. Our product eliminates those problems. We can build it to whatever dimension is required to create a wall-to-wall installation. We have a kick reflector on the bottom of our fixture so that the top of the wall is always fully illuminated. Also, the kick reflector acts as a glare shield so the people in the room can't see inside the fixture. You can only see it if you're directly below, which is a very nice feature. Now, if you don't like the kick reflector, this is what our competitor product is going to leave you with: shadows at the top of your wall, your object wall. That's the wall where they've got the company logo or trophies or the picture of the owner's girlfriend or something. Obviously, you don't want shadows on the top of an object wall, and that's why we build our fixture with the kick reflector to illuminate all the way to the top of the wall. These fixtures can be built as individuals or continuous runs, and even comprehensive and complex patterns fully illuminated. In the world of perimeter lighting systems, we've solved many of the problems associated with perimeter lighting systems. For one, the ugly gap between the back of the fixture and the wall. Many of our competitor products have these gaps between the fixture and the wall because the wall is never straight, but the fixture is. So the manufacturer wants to set that fixture off the wall so it's not touching the imperfect wall and causing aesthetic problems. But they cause a new aesthetic problem, and that is an intentional gap between the back of the fixture and the wall. And obviously that's something that we don't want at Gamalux. So what we've done is we've developed a mud flange for the unfinished wall. And this mud flange gets installed on that unfinished wall just above the ceiling here. Now that mud flange gets mudded over. In the bottom of that mud flange, there's a little bit of a groove, and that groove is there to receive the reflector assembly from our fixture. Here's the end result. You end up with no gap between the bottom of our reflector and the top of the finished wall. An absolutely clean architectural aesthetic that no other manufacturer offers. Now, we offer two types of illumination with these fixtures, either grazing illumination to shoot light straight down the wall, or ambient illumination to bounce light back off into the space. The grazing illumination, again, shoots light so effectively you're going to get shadows on even the most shallow texture. In order to do this, we use a semi-specular aluminum reflector with a parabolic shape and a reflective lamp barrier. So light that hits this lamp barrier bounces up into the main reflector so it could be shot straight down the wall. Now notice the height of that lamp barrier. barrier is right here. So the cutoff angle between the LEDs and the top of the lamp barrier is right here, which means that if you have a mirror or shiny tile on the wall, you'll never see the reflection of those lamps on that mirror or shiny tile. But please be very careful. Do not use our grazing optic on a flat wall unless you know that that wall is going to be perfectly flat. Because if it's not, then our grazing optic is actually going to highlight every dimple and pimple on that wall, and that is not something you want. So we recommend, if you're going to go with a flat wall, we recommend a level 5 finish only. Otherwise, if you have brick or stone or tile or some kind of a textured material and you want to create shadows, obviously our grazing optic is going to do very well with that. In those flat wall scenarios, which are not level 5 finishes, again, we offer our ambient illumination optic, which actually uses the wall as a reflective surface. We're bouncing light directly off the top of the wall to get usable light back out into the space. Now, on our in the PDF version of our specification sheet, we offer an interactive page where each of these little check boxes is actually a hyperlink to the spec sheet of the fixture that has that particular characteristic. For instance, if you want a 4-inch wide perimeter lighting system that can be built to custom lengths, you click right here, and it's going to jump you to the spec sheet for that particular product. So it's a nice way to find our products based on how you're going to use them and the kind of characteristics you want them to have. Of course, we still have some of our older styles of fixtures. We have the Legato product. These are individual fixtures typically used in boardroom or a conference room, places like that where they're not going to go in continuous runs because these fixtures do not have joining capability at the end of the housing. We also still offer those older style of fixtures that kind of look like those perforated steel fixtures that were so popular maybe 20 years ago or so. Well, we still sell them because actually our fixture is all aluminum construction. It'll never rust. So people are still using them under canopies in a damp location environment. So we still have that kind of stuff. As well as fluorescent. We still kept all of our fluorescent designs because we know that not everybody has made the jump to LED, and so we don't want to alienate people. So we still have our LED designs. We've also reintroduced the round fixture back into the lighting market, but of course we've given it LED capability and also rotation capability, so that each element can be pointed just where it needs to go, not just at 45-degree angles, but actually at 362 degrees of rotation capability, so you can aim these pieces wherever you like. We can also build comprehensive patterns of these fixtures, so you're creating a more cohesive lighting system. In addition to our 2.5-inch wide round, we also are working on a 4-inch as well, which is bidirectional illumination and also rotatable. So now you can rotate it to illuminate the walls instead of just the ceiling and the floor, maybe in a corridor. The G-beam portal fixture is one of our newer designs where we're taking a G-beam housing with all of the capability to integrate that G-beam housing into all kind of different ceiling systems, wall systems, furniture systems. But rather than having that white lens in the bottom of the fixture, we replace that with a backlit acrylic. Now, we are not the first manufacturer on the market with this product. The Mark Fin was the first product on the market, but we believe it had some aesthetic problems with visible fasteners and screws and such that you can actually see through the acrylic block. It's not our idea of a good aesthetic. So because we were not the first to market, we felt we needed to do what we could to improve the aesthetic, and we believe we've accomplished that with no visible fasteners on the fascia of the fixture, no fastener shadows, or any fasteners visible inside the acrylic itself. Now, these fixtures can be built for use as individuals or in continuous runs of any length. Now, if you go with continuous runs of kind of standard 4-foot increment lengths, then your acrylic blocks are going to have about a 2.5 or a 3-inch gap between them. But if you want to do custom length fixtures, we can actually offer you custom length blocks with the standard gap between, or we can use standard length blocks with custom gaps between. So it just depends on what the dimensions are in your space and what kind of effect you're trying to create will determine how we build the fixtures. But again, these are Gamalux G-beam fixtures, so of course they can be mudded into the gyp or installed with a cover flange, or they can be installed into any grid ceiling system, wood ceiling systems, metal ceiling system. It doesn't matter what the ceiling system is because this is a G-beam product. We can interface with any ceiling system and even integrate into furniture systems as well if you require that. Now, we have 12 different models for the acrylic block, ranging from an inch exposed to 3 inches exposed. Then we have an 1.5 inch wide blocks, and then we have 1/2 inch wide blocks. We offer 3 sides frosted where the long sides are perfectly clear, and then we also have 5 sides frosted. So all those combinations, a total of 12. We will entertain the possibility of doing different dimensions in these blocks, but we'll look at that on a case-by-case basis. All of our LED fixtures offer color changing capability on DMX control. Now, if you want RGBW, usually we don't like to do that because the W, the white element in those RGBW strips, tends to be very weak and kind of milky, and we really don't like that. So what we do is we offer, in our specification sheets, we offer RGB plus W, where the white is a completely separate high output capability circuit, so that you can have separate control of the white. So say, for instance, you're doing like a hotel lobby or something like that. Well, maybe during the main operating hours, you've got several of these fixtures in that hotel lobby, and they're doing different color changing schemes and whatnot. But at 2 o'clock, 2:30 in the morning, the cleaning crew needs to come in. Well, the color changing isn't going to be very useful to them, so they can flip a switch, turn on that white circuit at high output, and now they've got all the illumination in the space that they need. Or maybe you're doing a bar or a nightclub or something like that. Again, you got multiple fixtures doing all different color temperature, color changes, but then when the bartender wants to go home, he flips a switch at 2 o'clock on 2:30 in the morning, and the white circuit comes on, and now you know what happens at a bar. When they turn on the white lights, it's time to go, right? So functionality from these systems is not just a decorative piece, but it can be used as a fully functional lighting system. Now, we can also have those acrylic blocks laser etched, and now you're creating signage for your customer even when they don't have a signage budget. I'm not talking about little exit signs. This is a usable lighting fixture generating up to 750 lumens per foot. Now, here's where it gets good. This is a G-beam housing, and that means we can make comprehensive and complex patterns of standard fixtures with the standard white lens, but maybe at a certain part of that pattern, maybe where that pattern passes by a particular door, you want to switch from the standard white lens to the acrylic block and have it etched, and that etching says pharmacy in the hospital. Or in a different part of that pattern of fixtures, you got another block etched and it says examination rooms. So you're using the dynamic nature of that block to draw attention to itself. You're using the laser etching to create signage for your customer, even if they don't have a signage budget, and because it's all built in as one comprehensive lighting system, you don't have the VE conversations about that one particular element because it's all built in with one part number and one price. It's kind of like when you buy that car and you want to upgrade the radio. You're not paying for a second radio to be installed at a different time. When you coordinate properly with the dealer, they'll deliver the car with that upgraded radio, and now you're only paying the difference between the original radio and the new one. So this is what we mean when we talk about creating value within the project. Doing things in a creative and an interesting way, in a way that doesn't make things difficult for the distributor, doesn't make things difficult for the installing contractor, and actually creates value for all the people involved in the job. Now, as far as paint, we do all of our own painting here at our factory in Gamalux. We use an automotive and airline quality finish. Boeing has used this paint. Porsche has used this paint, so it's a very high quality finish. In addition to those 13 standard finishes that we offer on all of our specification sheets, we also offer wood grain finishes. Now, this is not a sticker. It's not a decal. It's not a laminate that can peel off. This is actually a powder coat base where we send the housings to a vendor in Houston. They powder coat the entire housing up to 24 feet long in a single piece. Absolutely beautiful. Then they take the fixture out of the oven, wrap it in this wood grain texture film, vacuum seal that onto the housing, and then bake it again. And that texture actually impregnates into the softened powder coat. So it's a very durable finish, very beautiful, and we offer 8 finishes for the wood grain. We hope you see now that our vision, our goal is to become part of the architecture, but do it in such a way that actually helps the other people involved in these jobs to do their very best work, not cause problems for them, but help to solve problems for them so that they can build their business and build their reputations in the way that they want to as professionals. We love to have guests here at our facility to do the factory tours and classroom training. We always enjoy the time we spend with people, and then we love going out on the weekend. Enjoy the new relationships that we've started. If it's nice and sunny in our local wine country, we'll go out there and we'll do the hot air balloon rides and the winery tours. Or maybe if it's not right, the weather for that, maybe it's too cold, we'll go out to Palm Springs, out in the desert. We'll come up to the top of the 11,000-foot peak. We'll have lunch up there overlooking the entire beautiful valley. Or if it's too hot for the desert, we'll go out to the beach. It's only about 25, 30 miles away from us. Absolutely gorgeous. We'll rent out the Balboa Bay Resort, beautiful rooms, and go out on the ocean. This is actually a live shot that we took. That was a humpback whale breach just a couple hundred feet away from our boat. It was absolutely amazing. The moral of the story here is we love building partnerships and friendships. We spend a lot of time at our work. We want to enjoy the people that we work with. Thank you so much for your time. We wish you a wonderful day.